everyone. I don't have my slide up. There's a little feels
Get to the mic.
Closer to the mic.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay though with my mask on?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Dee Dee. I'm here to introduce our Ignite West Linn History on Fire. We're very excited. This is a whole new world. So we have 3 presenting here in the Ale House, our first 3 presentations, followed by 2 that are joining you on Zoom. Those of you who are on Zoom, and we will project you into the Ale House. So far it's working, knock on wood. So I'm really excited I'm going to introduce these 2 folks who have really been waiting to do a live presentation with us. You may have seen, I think, Delaney last year virtually, and then we postponed one in the fall. So just to remind you, Ignite are quick-moving, 20-slide, auto-advancing PowerPoint presentations. And I am excited to introduce Delaney Kenny and Pat Blair, who are the Vice President and President of Oregon Ladies Aside, a local side saddle club dedicated to sharing our love of horses, side saddle, and history with the world. And they come in costume. Okay? So if you want a second. As soon as you see the image, you're on.
Close to the mic.
Go ahead. Yep.
There you go.
All right. This is equestrian fashion in early Oregon. So throughout history, women have loved fashion. That's no secret. But there were a few problems when women started heading to Oregon. Fashion was a little hard to bring with them. Women coming overland brought calicos and usually just one good Sunday dress. There was not a lot of room for anything else in the wagon. So that love for fashion kind of had to be left behind. Ladies riding side saddle on the trail typically wore pants underneath their trail dresses, comfort and function. Arriving in Oregon, women had to hand sew their clothing with supplies they had brought on the trail. There was no market for anything yet, so everything was handmade and they used what they had. Many of the pioneers, including Pettygrove and Lovejoy, opened stores in Portland. These stores carried dry goods, clothing, sewing supplies, boots, and gloves to start with. So still not a lot of ready-made clothing. By 1862, Portland had 91 general merchandise stores,
Wow.
making things a little bit more accessible. Riding was also the only way to get to the stores through the mud that we all know and love here in Oregon. So riding fashions were a necessity as well as a form of fashion. So desire and demand for fashionable riding clothes grew within the city. You can see here some of the fashions that they had. By the 1860s, ladies began copying dresses from the fashion magazines that we were beginning to receive from back east. The invention of sewing machines and dress patterns made this work much faster and easier. So you began to see more complex fashions.
By the 1870s, the equestrians of Oregon were recreating riding fashions from Paris. Getting more and more fashionable as time goes on. Stores and seamstresses also began making custom riding clothes and hats, so we really see a progression to much more fashionable clothing. Hats, gloves, boots were also found at many of the new stores by this point, so you were able to purchase a few more items rather than having to have them handmade. Riding habits evolved for comfort with knit pantaloons, riding corsets, and split skirts. So that you didn't have to ride aside. Mail order catalogs made shopping for new styles easy and affordable, moving away from custom-made everything. And then, in 1910, Western cowgirls astride were the latest fashion. So many more split skirts. Very different look. And then by the 1920s, the riding skirt disappeared, replaced by modern fashions we still use today, such as the safety apron for riding aside, and then traditional hunt attire.
Wow.
Thank you so much, and we're working with this and our sound, but we appreciate you.
Get really close to the mic, everybody. Really close. Get really close to the mic.
Okay,
Because they can't hear you on Zoom.
You want me to extend it a little?
No, I'm going to ask a quick question. So I understand you all do writing in costume today. Like, I mean, well, maybe not during COVID, but at events, is that correct? Yes. So we could put the website of your organization, maybe, or how would people know? That would be my question. And I'll let you answer if you want to get really close to the mic, or you can tell me and I can answer for the group on Zoom.
We're working on building a new Facebook page, and we do events in Oregon.
Perfect. So the answer is they are working on a new Facebook page that we could join or become friends with, I guess is the right word, and then we could learn more about your events. Awesome. Thank you. Your costumes are terrific. Thank you for being here today. Okay, next up, Scott. Where are we? There we are. I'll introduce you, Scott, first.
Oh, I'm going out?
You're coming up. Sorry if you didn't know that. Where did I leave my cheat sheet? Okay, thank you again for your patience. We're learning that we need to be very close to this mic. Our next speaker will be talking about the lost history of the Oregon Grape Nursery and the Footpath Cafe. This is Scott McMahon. I want to make sure I pronounce that correct. Many of you know Scott. You've seen his videos. He's a local realtor who makes the online show around the neighborhood. Scott is also a board member at large with the West Linn Historical Society. So please welcome Scott. Okay, it'll take me a minute.
No worries, gotta pop this off.
Yep.
And then I'll pop these on. Come on. You know this works. Okay. I'll do my best to tell a story.
Okay, you are on.
All right, here we go. Oh, it's on. Okay, this is the lost history of the Oregon Grape Nursery and the Footpath Cafe, along with some other historical tidbits. Our story begins here at the Tualatin River, where Fields Bridge connects southwest Borland to West Linn. Joseph Fields laid claim to this area, and around 1852, he started to offer a ferry service for people who needed to cross the Tualatin River. And our internet is unstable. No. Anyway, in 1891, a covered bridge was built. There were a number of iterations of the covered bridge until a concrete version of the bridge was eventually built in 1953. As you can see, this is, I think, the second iteration of the covered bridge. Then, in 2007, the latest version of the bridge was constructed. And I think you'll see here, coming up, I think there it is, the bridge being, that was the old bridge. That's the new bridge, the last version of the bridge. Now, unfortunately, when the bridge was completed, the city closed off access to what was the end of Dollar Street. Before that, travelers would come off Fields Bridge and take either Southwest Borland, turning into Willamette Falls Drive, or exit onto Dollar Street. And so that's, the latest bridge now. Not covered. And then we go to, now this ties into the history of the Oregon Grape Nursery. Now, at the end of Dollar Street is where you find the remains of the Oregon Grape Nursery. And I think I have a slide popping up here. I had timed all this stuff, so I'm actually talking faster. There we go. So there we go. So it's important to know a little bit of history here, which is that in 1935, German-born Eugene Leitz opened the Milwaukee Floral Company, which is still in business today. And Eugene's grandson, Steve Leitz, would later marry a red-headed go-getter by the name of Cindy. And I will show you Cindy here after this slide. And I'll catch up. I'm going too fast, I guess. There she is. That's back in the 70s. So in 1975, they would purchase an old farmhouse on almost 3.5 acres of land at the end of Dollar Street. Soon after, the Lights opened the Oregon Grape Nursery. Now, the nursery is named after the state flower, the Oregon grape. And then Sydney Lights, as she was known then, admits that she knew nothing about which flower was which. And there she is. But she learned everything she could from her husband in his years of working in the family business. Now, initially, the Lightses were just going to focus on the wholesale of wildflowers and native shrubs, but 2 seasons in particular became very important for this very small nursery. One of them was springtime and Mother's Day. So I think we pop over to, there they are, Mother's Day. The nursery would expand large enough to need 5 greenhouses, a huge ice cooler to be built on the premises. Besides supplying wholesale flower baskets to businesses all over the country, the Oregon Grape Nursery would also sell retail to local residents. The second big one was Christmas time, and the small nursery gained notoriety with the production of 75-foot-long Christmas gardens and up to 25,000 hand-woven Christmas wreaths each year. Now, Cindy's kids, Greta and Isaac, grew up helping Mom with the business, even participating in parades and making their own wreaths themselves at a young age, even that small. So, the wreaths and garlands from the Oregon Grape Nursery were so well made and popular that the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. ordered them for their holiday decorations. Now, with Cindy's enthusiasm and Cindy's enthusiasm and willingness to be involved with the local community, the Oregon Grape Nursery donated and sponsored events in West Linn over the years, including donating the large garlands for the poles along historic Main Street, partaking in the city parades, and sponsoring river raft races along the Tualatin River. Now, in 1987, the nursery closed for a short period while Cindy and Steve were finalizing their divorce. In 1989, Cindy received full ownership of the business. Cindy sold a good portion of that property to developers above the nursery to ensure that the incoming residents had access to the nursery. Cindy had those developers build a path to the nursery's back door, known as the footpath. By 1993, with all the new homes coming in from the sale of her land, Cindy extended the footpath to the old farmhouse and turned it into the Footpath Cafe, run by her daughter Greta. You have to remember that Dollar Street was still connected to Fields Bridge, so guests would drive by the nursery all the time, and the Footpath Cafe was established. Drive-up coffee shop was created for the community. Guests could stop by and enjoy the cafe while also taking a tour of the nursery. Cindy would also book musicians and bring live music to the area, featuring some of the Portland's finest musicians to play at the Footpath Cafe. Now, between 1996 and 2006, Cindy would remarry and change her name to Carmen Vandemar. She would also license the cafe or nursery to John and Lori Blair, and she kept the wreath business going. Sadly, by the time the new Fields Bridge was completed, it ended up cutting off access to Dollar Street. And this turn devastated business, and access to the cafe became problematic, and visitors really had a hard time finding them until they just went out of business. So, although it's not quite distant history, it's history necessarily lost as well. The story of the Board and Grape Nursery and the Footpath Cafe was special to West Linn for a time that it ran for 35 years. I have clients that still remember going to field trips to the cafe. And if you happen to see Carmen around town and her kids, you say, thanks Carmen for 35 years in business and just a little bit of local history before it goes away. Because now there's a new school being built across the way, and before you know it, it just gone. Thank you.
Great job, great job.
Thank you.
Roger, you're going to be up next in 1 minute. Thank you, Scott. That was really fascinating. I know I remember going to the Footpath Cafe and that nursery, and when you could drive through the road and now the school's going on, and I guess we call that progress, but it is also really it's something to think back to that. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for that talk. And everyone knows how to get a hold of Scott. I think I keep looking forward to new videos you're going to make. I learn a lot about just my own almost neighborhood, so thank you for that. Okay, our third and final live from the Ale House is the history of West Linn Parks by Roger Shepard, who you saw just a little while ago. In 2020, the West Linn Historical Society published their first book on the history of West Linn Parks that is still for sale, as mentioned earlier. This talk will include highlights from the book. Roger Shepard, as you know, is co-president and a founder of the West Linn Historical Society. Please welcome Roger, and he will speak very close to the microphone.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be on in 1 second. Now.
Okay. We love our parks in West Linn. Early parks in the area before West Linn was incorporated in 1913 included privately owned parks. Schnorr Park was established as a gathering place for German immigrant families on 15 acres of property at the foot of Peaks Mountain across the Tualatin River from Willamette in the early 1900s. Another early park was Magones Park, established in the 1880s and included a dance barge called the Bluebird, which was anchored by the riverbank. In 1948, the West Linn City Council appointed a recreation committee to find a person to run a summer program in the city's 3 parks. The program for the first years was ping pong, checkers, swimming, baseball, and other small games. The Portland Railway Light and Power Company platted Willamette in 1908. Lot 35 of this plat contained a spring reserve, which provided drinking water for the new town of Willamette. This property became Willamette Park. The city of West Linn purchased property for a park from the Moody Investment Company in 1928 for the sum of $5,000. Frank Hammerly had been mayor of West Linn at the time, and it became Hammerly Park. In 1939, the city of West Linn purchased 15 lots of the Willamette Heights plat from Crown Zellerback for the sum of $1,500. This became Sunset Park. E.G. Caulfield willed his property to the city of West Linn. Caulfield also requested the new park be called Burnside Park in memory of his uncle, David Burnside, an early pioneer resident and store owner in Linn City. In July 1960, the city of West Linn purchased the property that became Wilderness Park from Clackamas County for $10. The deed specified that the city could only use the property for park and recreation purposes only. The city of West Linn acquired 4.1 acres from the state of Oregon at the conclusion of construction of the I-205 Abernathy Bridge in 1968. This became West Bridge Park. In 1969, the city of West Linn purchased Dr. McLean's house and 2.4-acre property for $27,000 using federal land, water conservation funds, Willamette River Greenway funds, and a donation from the McLean family. Mary S. Young, a wealthy resident of Lake Oswego, purchased 130 acres in 1960 between Lake Oswego and West Linn for her husband, Thomas Young. The Youngs donated the property to the state of Oregon. It was their intention that the property be left as a park to be enjoyed by everyone until eternity. The city of West Linn and the state of Oregon signed an agreement in 1994 for the city to take over maintenance and operation of the park. Virgil and Dorothy Maddox set out in a canoe in the early 1940s, paddling up and down the Willamette River looking for a place to live and build boats. They purchased property at the end of River Street. Now my timing is way off. Since the 1970s, the city of West Linn has added 15 new parks to its system. Many of these parks were lands deeded by the new subdivisions. Funding for the parks was often from system development fees paid by the developer. In 2020, the West Linn Historical Society published their first book titled The History of West Linn Parks. The book was dedicated to Ken Worcester, longtime Director of Parks and Recreation for the city of West Linn, who retired in 2019. Many more details about the history of West Linn Parks is available in the book, which can be purchased for $15 via the Historical Society website at westlinnhistory.org. Thank you.
Good job, Robert.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. And I think we all know how amazing our West Linn parks are, and I appreciate them. And thank you for the work on that book. And I know Lori Griffith should be honored as well. I'm not sure who else worked on that. Mike Waters. So thank you all. And I still need to get it. Actually, you have a copy. Yeah. The ex-mayor has a copy. So I live with him, so I guess I got a copy. Okay.
I shared the link to the book in the chat.
Oh, thank you. So for those of you on Zoom, Danny shared the link to the book on chat. So you can go ahead and purchase a copy, which supports the Historical Society. Thank you. All right, we have two more. Thank you for your flexibility. Our final two speakers today are with those of you who are on Zoom, and you will be projected to those of us who are in the Ale House. Our next speaker is really awesome and has helped us learn other things in previous Ignite talks. Last time this young man spoke, he helped us better understand gaming. Today, Riley Schreiber, who is a junior, right, a junior at West Linn High, you just told me that, will talk about the history of anime.
Anime.
Anime. I know how to say that word. Anime. Thank you. Riley, please help us. Help me. Thank you, Riley.
Pokemon is a great example of anime. So in 2016, there was a big craze when the video game Pokemon Go came out, and that helped bring anime more into mainstream media. But anime, as I stated earlier, is the Japanese word for cartoon or animation, like Disney animated films and that sort of thing. But when I'm talking about anime, I'm specifically talking about the Japanese style of animation, which can be recognized due to a couple characteristics. For starters, we have the eyes. Anime-styled eyes are very large and kawaii, which is the anime word, not anime, Japanese word for cute. Also, anime is filmed and created at 12 to 15 frames a second instead of the normal 24. The first anime was in 1917. It was called Namakura Gatana, which was about a Japanese samurai who bought a dual-edged sword and went around town stabbing people with it. I am not joking, that is genuinely the premise of it. We only have a few copies of the film remaining, unfortunately. In 1933, Within the World of Power and Women was released, which was the first anime with sound. Unfortunately, every copy of this film has been lost due to the bombings of Hiroshima in the World War II, which also goes back into how anime was mostly used as a form of military propaganda in World War II. Until 1963 with Astro Boy, which was the first anime that was released in the West and gained wide popularity. This is a poster of it. Now, in the 1980s is when anime started really taking off in the West, and we have the release of Mobile Suit Gundam in 1979, which was a mech anime focused, I'll explain more of those later, inspired by Star Wars. This is Mobile Suit Gundam 2 that you can see here, released in 1981. Legends of the Galactic Heroes is a anime TV show released from 1988 to 1997, and it was very heavily inspired by Star Wars due to the popularity of the science fiction genre at the time. And following Legends of the Galactic Heroes, we have Akira, which was, for its time, the most expensive anime ever made with a $9 million budget. It was released in 1988 to a critical failure, but with VHSs and DVDs, it gained a lot of popularity and is now recognized as a cult classic. Shonen anime and Dragon Ball. In 1986, a TV show called Dragon Ball came out, and this was a perfect example of a shonen anime. Shonen is the Japanese word for little boy, so it is animes and TV shows that are directed towards younger audiences. A very popular shonen company that creates shonen anime is Shonen Jump. They've created classics such as One Piece and Naruto, One Piece being the longest running anime with over 900 episodes. We also have modern classics such as My Hero Academia. Now, some of you may have heard of the film Howl's Moving Castle, which released in 2005, but this was created by a Studio Ghibli, which their first film was created in 1989 and is titled Castle in the Sky. Studio Ghibli is very famous for its storytelling and animation abilities. Now, I touched on Pokemon earlier, but Pokemon was released, the original games, in the 1990s. The first anime adaptation was released in 1997 through 1999, titled Indigo League, and it was massively successful and spawned a lot of other anime TV shows of Pokemon. Now, I touched on mech anime before with 1979's Mobile Suit Gundam on the left, but in the center is Neon Genesis Evangelion, released in 1995, which is considered one of the best anime of all times. Mecha anime basically just means giant robots fighting each other. That is the entire genre. In the early 2000s, with the introduction of streaming services, anime started becoming much more mainstream. Here in the center is Death Note, which was released in 2006. It appeared on Netflix and has become many people's introduction into anime, which is why it's had many live-action adaptations of it that have all failed. To the left, we have Fate Stay Night, which is an adaptation of a visual novel video game into anime. Fate is the Marvel of the anime media, so it's got tons and tons of different shows within it. Slice of life is a genre of anime that is mostly focused on following an individual person's day-to-day lives. It is the closest thing that we have to a sitcom or a rom-com in the anime world. They are very popular in the 2010s, as you can see here. Isekai has also gained a lot of traction in the 2010s. Isekai is a Japanese word meaning transported to another world, so any anime storyline that has a character that's been transported to another world is an isekai. It started in 2012 with the release of Sword Art Online, and today, such as in 2016 with Konosuba's God's Blessing on This Wonderful World, we are seeing parodies of the genre, making fun of the cliches and tropes that it's introduced into anime, and that's what Konosuba does very well. Now, what can we expect from anime in the future? Well, we have the introduction of 3D animated visuals such as Beastars in the upper right corner, which is no hand animation, all 3D. Video games are taking inspiration from anime, such as on the left-hand side. And at the bottom, we have even internet popularity and celebrities that are taking inspiration from anime, such as VTubers. That's all. Any questions? Thank you.
Riley, you're pretty amazing.
It's not on yet.
Oh, turn that mic on. Riley, I just wanted to say you're pretty amazing. I don't know if you're keeping me young or making me feel like I know nothing, but I so appreciate your participation with us. And I want to, you remind me to say, for this Ignite series, we interpret history broadly and widely. So I look forward to another talk from you in the future. We will do some questions in a minute, but we have one more presenter. So I'm going to introduce David D. Jones, who many of you know with his other support for the Historical Society, including I first met him in the radio show a few years ago. I got to act opposite him, which was very fun. So today he is going to speak on Haunted. And many of you know he has a lot of involvement. Maybe he can tell us when he's done his involvement with that topic. But I'm going to stop talking, and Danny's going to bring the slides up. Welcome, David D. Jones.
Howdy. Hi, my name is David D. Jones. In 2013, Creatures of the Night did a scene at the West Linn Haunted Trail at Mary S. Young Park as a lark. We accidentally created an urban legend, and that led down a rabbit hole of questions that has now connected and enriched the lives of thousands of people now around the world. As haunting became a bigger and bigger part of our lives, I had to ask, can I justify this? This is a huge commitment on so many people. Is this just fun, or is this important? In answering what a haunt is, we started finding layers in history, psychology, community building, trauma recovery, and so much more, and it opened like a flower. So let's discuss what the nature of a haunt is. It's dark with special lighting. It's somewhere isolated, special, or sacred, a ritual place that looks radically different for this occasion. It is usually connected to the otherworld, ancestors, ghosts, or the divine. And it usually connects a bond between two people. It is a secret shared. It's how we connect, quickly bonding with one another, a rite of passage, an initiation, an annual holiday. It is the passing of implicit experience and sacred information. It can be natural or built. We share this pattern. And it all began long ago in the fire in the cave, images of shadow dancing on rocks and trees, keeping the darkness and dangers at bay, forming the earliest kobolds and bogarts of our imagination out of unknown sounds. It is a rite of passage. When you are old enough to wander away from the fire, reaching sexual maturity, or the deeper secrets in ritual that we have shared and you have lived your life. We developed more complex systems as we lived and housed ourselves, but we kept rebuilding this tradition. We kept returning to the shadow and fire again and again. And all over the entire globe and throughout all of our history, we always rebuild this. Let's talk about some of the biggies we know of. One of the most famous, the literal location of where Orpheus of Greek mythology enters the underworld to persuade Hades to let him bring his wife back. We go to the Gate of Hades in Mani, Greece. Orpheus enters Hades, the actual home of the dog Cerberus. He fails trials and monsters. His final wisdom, no matter how charming, powerful, important your love is, death is eternal. If only there were a Stephen King movie franchise that constantly retold this story. Then we go to Pluto's Gate in Turkey, dedicated to the goddess Cybele. It's filled with lethal CO2 of dead animals littering all around the entrance. Castrated priests knew where the pockets of oxygen were, so they entered and reemerged, proving their divinity. They used to sell swallows so that you could let them loose to prove the lethality of the cave. The ATM cave in Belize, humans and adults were sacrificed, many with reshaped heads. Entrance to the afterworld, domain of 12 Mayan death gods, names like Stabbing Demon, Skull Staff. And it was filled with ceremonial kill holes and amazing artifacts. Crystallized skeletons, such as the Crystal Maiden. Like most sacred haunts, you needed a holy guide who passed the sacred mysteries along to you, filled with altars for multiple types of offerings. We see the pattern whole wherever you go. We go to the city of ghosts in China. The entrance to hell of all three major religions. The dead must pass 3 tests. Bridge of Helplessness, Great Ghost Torturing Pass, into the Palace of Tianzhu. Ghosts stand on 1 foot for 3 minutes while evil souls fall into the hells. We come back to St. Patrick's Purgatory in Ireland. It's an island pilgrimage. For 3 days, you pray, standing, kneeling, and walking sacred spots while fasting and barefoot. I've been to many pilgrimages. Usually the path rocks are worn smear smooth like glass-like. But this is why I love the Irish. They don't want you to feel cheated, so locals remove the smooth rocks and resharpen them, replacing them at night. And then they eagerly volunteer to poke you awake if you fall asleep praying during the night and in the dark. We are talking haunts again and again. We can talk about the Dogon tribe in Mali, West Africa. They meet once a year in a sacred cave to discuss the ancient teachings and astronomy, including the rings of Saturn, the moons of Jupiter, and secrets of a binary star system they identify with Sirius, considering both the alpha and beta. Newgrange, Ireland is over 5,000 years old. It's a grand passage tomb. Winter solstice, light enters a roof box, bounces off of white stones in the back, floods the chamber with light, revealing pictographs only on this date. Used for thousands of years, this is the light in the darkness. The Chauvet Cave in France, 37,000 years old, but sealed for the last 27. Rockslide opened it in 1994. So fresh that scraped torch crumbs from the last person to use it still lay on a shelf. Currently the oldest and best preserved site of showing us who we are and have always been. It's currently the best example of our cradle of this process. And we still do this to this day. In the LDS Church, marriages take place in a room that no one else may ever enter. Christmas Mass at midnight is the celebration. The bright light still in the darkest night of winter. We live this pattern. We go into the dark, somewhere isolated or sacred. We connect to the otherworldly or divine. We are with someone else. We pass along implicit experience and sacred information. We are all connected to a universal chain predating all human history. It is something we are compelled to do across aeons of time. When we see and understand the pattern, we can understand ourselves. We become enlightened. Haunting is sacred, and we are all haunted. Thanks.
Very nice.
Wow.
Wait
That
for
was
it. It's not on
awesome.
yet.
What?
Mic's on.
I think it's on.
It is now.
Okay,
Mine
wow. That was awesome, David. I am so glad this is recorded because I need to watch a couple of those again, including yours. That was great. So what we're gonna do, some of you need to leave, and that's fine. Of course, if you're on Zoom, you can leave whenever you want. But I do want to open it up to a few questions. If any of you on Zoom want to write your questions in chat,
Or they can unmic, they can just-
or you can absolutely unmic, that's probably easier. But before we do that, I want to just give a huge shout out to the Willamette Ale and Cider House where we are today. And if you don't know Ann Shea and her team, they do.
There she is.
Oh,
Yay.
okay.
Good time.
She's coming to get one of the taps back here because it's a popular something. But the point is, oh, this is great. You know, this place is awesome, and they do such great work supporting community-based efforts. So please come, buy their beer, buy their ale, or that is beer, cider. Say hi to Ann. Okay, thank you, Ann. That was good timing. Okay, now on to the questions. Are there questions? I don't think you need me anymore. Anybody online? Or any of you, questions? Oh, here's one from Riley. You're gonna have,
Someone's got to read in the mic.
you don't have mic, right?
I don't.
Riley, the question is, how would you say the evolution of haunts over the years have influenced pop culture in modern day? Massively, and we see multiple times where those traditions take radical changes. It's most reflected in the history of Halloween specific to America. We see it's connected to kind of socio-ecological niches around the country. In Ohio in the 1950s, Halloween started to really grow, and we were finding another way to kind of replace the mysteries that we had lost. We saw it greatly increased through the Castro district in San Francisco, in men from all around the country traveling there to be themselves for one night of the year. America really kind of took Halloween and kind of embraced it. It is a ridiculously important holiday that we don't really think of, and we kind of treat it with, very light. And that's kind of what we kept uncovering, that Halloween is one of the few holiday, or I'm sorry, to your question, yes. And then it starts to reflect in our media, in our stories, and then it reflects back again. The way these stories transmute over time is a reflection of who we are. So whatever monsters became popular in local areas hundreds of years ago were usually a reflection of whatever the fears or concerns, but they didn't have the language to express it, so they or understanding of the concept, so they would create this monster. In some cases they were talking about tuberculosis, cancer, they were talking about rabies, and we would or explaining why children die in the night, crib death. So we would create a monster that would represent those fears. And so we use that monster to process it as a group. It's actually a form of therapy. It's the way that we kind of heal and deal with the unknown or that which we're uncomfortable with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Questions, put them in the chat, or anyone in the room can come up to the mic and ask them. Riley, I threw out a question to you, which I know you see, if you have any thoughts on that.
There's a question. Oh, in the chat. Still an echo. Awesome, thank you. It says to Riley, do you have a favorite anime production? I do, actually. It is, I mentioned it earlier, Sword Art Online. It is an isekai anime, so a character that's been transported to another world. But what makes it unique is the fact that it is a character who is stuck in a video game. So he puts on a VR headset and then gets transported into a video game. And I actually have the books right here next to me because I love these books. But it's based off of a novel, and they turned it into an anime adaptation. And within Japanese culture, there's something called a light novel, which is almost identical to what we have here, except every important event that occurs, there is a picture that goes along with it, drawn in the anime style. And those have been interpreted into anime TV shows and films that we have nowadays. But Sword Art Online is my favorite. I love it a lot. So, yeah.
If you put the name of that in chat, that would be great for some of us who aren't quite as quick.
Oh yeah, sure.
There is one more question. It's for Roger, so I'm going to invite Roger to come up to the microphone. Roger, the question is, have we lost any parks in West Linn? And if it's just a no, I can say that, but if you want to expand on that, you can talk.
Not that I know of.
Not that he knows of is his answer. So,
We continue to gain little parks.
we continue to gain parks, says the ex-mayor. One of them, not Larry. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Danny?
I think there's one more in chat.
Can you read it to me?
Oh, it was what's my favorite product? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, it's a timeline question from David for Riley.
Okay.
Another one. Okay. From David, you showed the timeline of the anime's evolution. What do you feel is one of the most important evolutionary arcs? The 1980s, by far. The 80s were massively influential for the pop culture aspect of anime here in the West, because up until then, we hadn't had a way to broadcast anime widely in the West. You would have had to go to a theater to watch one of those earlier ones from the 1960s. Or you would have to have owned a television or something like that. But in the 80s, anime took off massively, and this is potentially due to science fiction becoming really popular here in the West with Star Wars. As I previously mentioned, a lot of anime at the time have drawn from Star Wars, and some of the best ones still draw from it today, in my opinion. But the 80s were incredibly influential, and we also see this with like the starts and the roots of some anime that are still going to this day. I previously mentioned One Piece is an anime TV show that started in the 1980s, and it is still going. It has, I believe, 900 episodes now, each one being about 20 minutes long, so that's a lot of content. But that isn't the most that isn't even the longest anime of all time. There's one that the name escapes me, unfortunately, but it has been going since, I believe, 1979, and that one has over 2,000 episodes, I believe. Anyways, I have certainly not watched that, but the 80s were incredibly influential. Yeah.
Thank you, Riley, and thank you all. I think we're